Je pense sans cesse à toi.
Hello and welcome to The Foretop. It's a roundtable discussion of today's hot button topics in food and beverage. I'm your host, Catherine Cole. We are continuing our oceanic theme in episode 57, first discussing sea cutery, a term we will be using in the coming year, I think. And next we're going to talk about sea salt. We know it comes from the sea, but I think most of us are not entirely clear how it's harvested. Finally, we'll have a quick chat about what you can drink with foods from the ocean. We are not recording in the studios of OPB today, but we are in a beautiful renovated warehouse in Southeast Portland, just steps from the Willamette River. And this is the home of Jacobsen Salt, the company built by guest panelist Ben Jacobsen. Ben, thank you so much for hosting us here. And do you want to tell us a quick little something about this space that we're in?
Yeah, we host events, anything from wine tastings to weddings to 200-person sit-down dinners, and then a retail store here as well. So it's a really nice versatile space. Everything is on wheels, so it's very easily movable.
Well, I'm super excited to record here today. We are also joined by Kristofor Lofgren, the founder and CEO of the Sustainable Restaurant Group, which we will learn more about in a minute. Thank you so much for joining us, Kristofor.
Thanks for having me.
And sadly, our third panelist is not here today because the air travel gods intervened. So we are going to be a three-top, and I think the conversation will be just as scintillating with three of us. So now let's dive into our first course. Here comes sea cutery. Pescetarianism is the world's fastest growing diet today, and in the restaurant scene, we're starting to see a new term for a platter of beautiful raw and cured seafood. This term is sea cutery. There's also a term floating around, sea lami. So I thought we could start out by discussing this. Kristofor Lofgren, your restaurants mastered the art of sea cutery long before the term came into vogue, so maybe you can start this off and maybe tell us why more people are moving to a fish-based diet and what's the allure of a simple platter of raw and cured fish.
Thanks, Catherine. We put seafood charcuterie on our menu in 2011, a little bit ahead of the curve, I guess. And as far as the growth and popularity of seafood, I think it's coming because people are caring more and more about their health. People are recognizing the link between food and their health. Food as medicine is something that is very big in terms of our thinking as a company, and the products we provide our guests. And so I think that more and more people, seafood was already the most widely consumed protein source in the world. In most developing countries, it's kind of the only protein source. And so as people are starting to know that, too many land-based animal products, pork, beef, chicken, things like that are actually not that healthy for them in mass quantities, seafood's sort of a good alternative. Certainly there's also the rise in popularity of veganism, vegetarianism, but I think for people who find that they do need some form of animal protein, seafood is sort of the go-to choice now. And we're really excited to be a part of that trend and managing our oceans and the conservation of those oceans appropriately so that we have future generations who can enjoy as much sea cutery as they want.
So with more people moving to a seafood-based diet, I'd like to dig in a little more to that last statement. Is this posing challenges in terms of availability of seafood?
Yeah, so scarcity of resources is always an issue when you're using something that, you're taking from the planet that's a natural resource, and you have an overpopulation of people. And the overpopulation issue is certainly interesting because technically speaking, we can feed all of the people on the planet with the food that's currently grown on the planet. The problem is that we grow, first off, most of our agricultural foods, land-based foods, for the production of factory-farmed animals, not humans. So if we switched over a lot of those fields to actually produce food for humans and reduce the amount of land-based animal meats, that would be one step. The second thing is, from the wild capture seafood side of things, we harvest in a year about 140 million metric tons. Approximately, the estimates are anywhere between 80 million and 110 million that make it to people's mouths. So you're talking about a waste of anywhere of 30 to 50 million metric tons, which is a massive number. And a lot of that is wasted by improper transport, improper storage. So not having a cold chain. Think if you're on the coast of Africa catching a fish and then it needs to get to France, Do they have the technology available with freezers and refrigeration and icing stations, and then the trucks are cold and things like that, all the way to France. So what ends up happening is a lot of that fish gets wasted along transport. And it doesn't make it to people's mouths. And so it's essentially the same issue as people, which is now becoming a popular thing, especially in restaurants, people throwing food away, right? Food waste. Mm-hmm. So people are moving more towards zero waste menus, being more thoughtful about, the ugly produce in grocery stores, things like that. We're seeing this rise of people starting to notice that there's a lot of food actually to go around, but we just need to manage the scarcity of resources better. So our whole initiative with Bamboo Sushi and Quick Fish and at the Sustainable Restaurant Group is to help distributors, suppliers, fishermen, fisherwomen, fishers in general, ranchers, producers manage their resources properly and work with them in the supply chain and in the production process to be able to A, have no waste, B, make sure that whatever is caught is used, sold, consumed, and then C is actually of the highest quality both for the environment as well as for human health. And if we can tackle all of those issues in one, then we can really start fixing kind of a global broken system of supply chain logistics and other things, which I can get to in a future question. I don't want to keep drolling on about this, but that is sort of our entire focus and how we look at the way that the supply chain, the sustainability, and the environment and people all come together.
So getting back to the point of food waste, that makes me wonder, so with these new charcuterie platters, we're starting to see seafood sausage. Is this a way to reduce food waste?
I mean...
Have you tried it?
Yeah, I have.
I'm really curious about this charcuterie. This is a completely new term to me. So.
Yeah, I mean, you would have eaten it probably, Ben, at some point, maybe if you've traveled to Southeast Asia in some form of like
fish cake?
Fish cakes, Thai do a blood sausage, like a tuna blood sausage.
Uh-huh. Oh, wow.
Which we did also I'm half Swedish, also in the Scandinavian sort of areas of the world. There's a lot of this. So it's definitely not new. A lot of cultures have been doing sort of a cured seafood base for a long time. And if you think even, explorers, right? Kristofor Columbus, he didn't just eat, steak, right? He was probably pulling a lot of fish out of the ocean and, salt cod. Yep. Exactly, things like that. Well, that's our fourth guest.
Yes, that is our fourth panelist.
The fourth panelist was
a very cute
pooch.
dog named Luca.
Sorry. No worries. So anyway, yeah, I think that there is definitely something to be said for, anytime you can make these small initiatives, but the reality of the situation is that the world's not going to save the oceans by, eating seafood charcuterie. It's a great thing for niche businesses. The world will be able to change the entire distribution channel towards whatever people are wanting to consume in a healthier way, and then that would really do it. And this is a part of it, right? The seafood charcuterie is a part of it. But it has to be, kind of a multi-step process, because you got to get people who eat, fish fillets. That's the largest, actually. McDonald's is the largest buyer of seafood in the world. Most people don't know that, just from that one product.
Wow.
So it's like, if you look at that scale and scope, like that's where the meat of the situation is. And when you can start changing those supply chains and changing that way of making sure that the fishery is not overfished and making sure that it's monitored properly, making sure there's no waste and all those other things. And then aquaculture, farm raising of fish, being another big component of that.
Yeah, we talked about the last episode. We talked about organic seafood farms, which is kind of a new concept. Yeah,
exactly. So
and on land seafood farms too, like on land farm raised trout. And
Yeah.
Some are good, some are not. We're just trying to make them all better. Everybody that we work with, we just want them to be of the highest standard.
It kind of blows my mind that we still eat wild seafood, because there are very few food categories that we gather from the wild anymore. I mean, maple syrup, I guess, cranberry bogs are wild. I mean, but you kind of can only count them on one hand. And yet there's this whole realm of seafood where most of it is wild.
Yeah. And in mass production, seafood is the last thing that we hunt for in the world in mass, right? Absolutely, you use maple syrup or some more artisanal things as examples, but there's even farm raised stuff now.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as seafood goes, I mean, you're talking billions and billions and billions of dollars of product every year. That's just, we're going out there kind of with a blindfold on, going, I bet it's over here. I bet it's over there. Let's go get it. And everything else is, very regimented and processed, and
in turn probably overfishing a lot of those fisheries that are that once you kind of hit the jackpot, it's probably, it is difficult to regulate that sort of fishing environment.
Yeah, the incentive structure is very strange. And it's also a very difficult thing because, we live on planet Earth, which is always cracks me up, because 75% of the planet's covered in ocean. And that, shows kind of the hubris of our terrestrial species. 95% 95%, 99%, depending on the statistics you look at, of the biomass on the planet is under the ocean. So, we don't know a lot about it. We know more about space than we do about the depths of our oceans. And so I think when we can start learning more about that and how our role as human beings interacting with the oceans, and the impact we have on that from, everything from carbon sequestration to ocean acidification, climate change, overfishing, et cetera, then we'll start being able to live more in peace with the planet, because the entire regulation of our atmosphere and everything is done by the ocean, which all intersects with the health of the oceans, the biomass, the species, everything like that.
Amazing how your food choices have such implications, such large implications.
Yeah.
Well, so Ben, I feel like I've chatted with you about the fact that you lived in Scandinavia, and that was part of what inspired you to start Jacobsen Salt. So did you have any fabulous cured fish experiences when you were living? I think you were living in Denmark and
then Norway.
Norway?
For close to 5 years, and I was a student for half that time. So I was most definitely on a budget, and when you said charcuterie, I had no idea what you meant, but now when you talk about fish cakes, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
Fiskekake,
right?
is what there are in Norway, and it's a really, I think, in my opinion, delicious, pretty affordable, easy to cook way of kind of eating seafood, and they're very popular in Scandinavia. But yeah, I mean, Scandinavia for me was most definitely where I learned about good salt for the first time. My mom is a great cook when I was growing up, but I never was exposed to finishing salt of any sort. And my girlfriend at the time, when I was living in Denmark, brought home a package of relatively expensive salt. That being said, like salt is, good salt is more expensive than industrially produced bad salt, but by and large, your total pocket spend is just not that much. You might spend $10 every other month on salt if you're only buying good salt. And I tried good salt for the first time and really was just blown away by how much better really, really simple things could be by simply using just a really good salt. And moved back here to the U.S. and realized that nobody in America made a really great finishing salt. And that began a 2.5-year journey for me to try and hopefully figure that out. And literally bought a kiddie pool at Fred Meyer for $6.99 and put it in the back of my backyard and filled it with salt water and walked away. Came back a couple of months later and there was no salt there. So that kind of began the process of me trying to figure out, all right, well, there are infinite ways to reduce seawater. What's the way that makes a clean, briny salt consistently every single time, and finally figured out that process, and now we have a facility. We're actually on an old oyster farm on the south end of Netarts Bay,
Very cool.
Just south of Whiskey Creek Shellfish Hatchery, which is and the owners of that place are the folks who figured out kind of the solution to ocean acidification in terms of shellfish.
Yeah.
Gestation and I guess breeding, or whatever that term might be, and they add calcium carbonate to their seawater, in small amounts to neutralize that acidification, and that allows the oyster larva to grow to the point where it's.
We discussed this in the last episode as well.
No kidding, so cool.
Yeah, there are programs where people gather up oyster shells and throw them back into the sea for exactly that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's to me it's a fascinating world, and you hear of oyster farmers, but you rarely hear of oyster broodstock growers and oyster larva growers, and they're one of just probably a handful of oyster larva growers in the country, and they have these massive seawater tanks that are close to the size of this room here, and they'll drain the whole tank, and out of that tank will come 10 million oyster larvae, and that'll be in the size of the palm of my hand, and they put them in a wet paper towel and put them in a FedEx box and ship them across the country. It's just, wow. It's I don't know, that whole world is really fascinating to me.
And again, it's so interesting how we're kind of like straddling the line between wild and, farmed. And I mean, you're basically harvesting ocean water.
Yeah. Yeah, we make seawater or salt from seawater. It takes, 2 weeks more or less from start to finish, and we very much depend on the quality of the seawater. And I've made salt from 27 different spots along the Oregon and Washington coast, and Netarts Bay, where we make our salt now, is far and away the best salt that I've made out of all of those spots, and that's due to a variety of different reasons. But we also are at the mercy of nature, as we should be, and so 2 to 3 times a year, Dungeness crab will molt and walk out of wiggle out of their shells in Netarts Bay. Well, in every other place that they live, but in doing so, they release collagen into the water, and during that time, and for close to 3 years, we couldn't figure out why during a certain couple of periods of time of the year we couldn't make flake salt, and turned out that I was sitting at a bar in Netarts with an oyster farmer buddy of mine, explaining this to him, and he said, "Well, crabs are molting." And I was like, "Huh?" And so we started to track it, and sure enough, it's crabs molting and collagen being released into the water that prevents we can still make salt, but we just can't make the really light, flaky, delicate salt that we sell as finishing salt. So we make other types of salt during that time, which is fine.
Very cool.
So what do you think, Kristofor? If there were more people harvesting sea salt, would this have any effect on the rising sea levels in the world? Because do you end up with fresh water, Ben, after you've harvested?
Yes and no. We do end up with fresh water and steam, and then we end up, our byproducts are fresh water, steam, calcium carbonate, which we give to chicken farmers in Tillamook and around the Northwest, but they use it as a amendment for their chicken feed to harden eggshells, and then a magnesium sulfate, technically an Epsom salt. We sell that to Loyalty and a bunch of other places in the area.
I have rubbed that on my body then when I've been there.
Well, thank you very much.
I've CQ-ed myself.
So I'm so curious about all the different ways to harvest salt, because I think people, when they think of salt, they just think of like a salt flat, because I guess people have seen that picture. But Kristofor, do you know anything about harvesting salt from seaweed? I understand this is kind of the cool new thing in culinary circles.
Ben would know a lot more than I would about how to make salt from seaweed. I know of it a little bit. Seaweed, one of the things that's very unique about it is it has natural monosodium glutamate, MSG, which most people consider to be a terrible thing. It can be in the laboratory created version, but it naturally occurs in the environment in many different forms. And MSG is actually the thing that gives the last taste sense of what people call umami. Mm-hmm. Its flavor profile. It's kind of got this undertone depth to it that's like salt plus, sort of like salt's big brother, like old grandfather with Pappy Van Winkle. It's like, extra salty, but like really good. And so we tend to find like kombu, which is a type of seaweed, Japanese seaweed, which is a type of kelp, and other various ones. And there's multiple different types of seaweed out there, especially in Asian culture where they harvest seaweed and you eat it, which we have. We have foraged seaweed salads in our restaurants. But with that, you can make some incredible salts, and we will take seaweed and we'll dry it, and we'll essentially grate it down, and you can put it on the top of different salads or even steak or fish or anything like that, and it gives this kind of incredible umami flavor because of the MSG and the salt and the sea flavor. I don't necessarily know if it would be widely consumed as much, but again, we're kind of working somewhat in an artisanal aspect with it, so it could be something that's on the shelves of a grocery store or something like that in China, and I just haven't been and seen it. So I know of how it's used in Japanese culture and what it's done, but it's a little bit more sort of special there in that way.
Are you guys, you don't do any form of salt cod, do you? Or any form of
we don't.
Reconstituted dried fish, do you?
No, we don't. I'm trying to think. I mean, we'll use dried fish from time to time. I mean, the only dried fish that we really use routinely is bonito, and we'll do a bonito flake, so you get in the block.
Which are delicious.
And we put them on top of our shishito peppers. And, bonito is a skipjack tuna, and it's got that nice, really deep red color to it. It runs at a very special time of year, and it oxidizes very quickly, so it'll go bad very fast. So you know if you're going to eat it raw, you want to eat it very fresh. It'll have kind of almost like a ruby color to it. And then it's fantastic canned. That's oftentimes a canned tuna, like a higher-end canned tuna is bonito. And then in this kind of dried block form. And that's actually my personal favorite other than the raw. The raw form's amazing, but it's, again, 10 days out of the year you can kind of get it. So, yeah, but we don't do... we've done little specials here and there over the years, but we don't do anything too salt-bake fish drying kind of processing. Mostly, we're sushi, so we mostly stick with the raw, freshly killed product.
Yeah. Kristofor, I'm curious. We heard Ben's sort of origin story in Denmark and Norway. How did you learn so much about Japanese cuisine?
I don't hate me, Portland. I grew up in Los Angeles, and my mom's lived here for 30 years, so I comically refer to myself as a Caligonian. I've lived between both places. My father's in Los Angeles still. My mom's here still. And growing up in LA, sushi was something that, outside of Japan, I think LA has the most Japanese restaurants in the world. New York might be a second close to that, but still LA is pretty large Japanese population. And so being there, I just got introduced to sushi at a reasonably early age for the 90s. Now, it's amazing how many families and kids eat in my restaurants. It blows my mind.
It's great.
And it's awesome. And I will routinely have parents telling me that their, kids' college funds or their retirement funds are getting used up in salmon nigiri. And I say, thank you very much. We're doing all kinds of good work for the world for those kids, so don't worry.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful to see. And I remember growing up thinking I was kind of ahead of the curve eating sushi when I started about 16 years old and thinking it was really scary and kind of gross, and then thinking, wow, this is actually really good. And you learn the difference between good sushi and bad sushi and all those other things. But that sort of love affair at an early age was something that was very exotic and interesting. And sushi has such an artisanal artistry, craftsmanship to it that almost no other type of cuisine really has. There's an oral history that gets passed down with it. It's just very unique. And so I kind of fell in love with it. And then when I got to Portland to go to Lewis and Clark for environmental law, I couldn't find any good sushi restaurants here. And so I thought, well, we should start one, and it should also be to the Portland ethos. It should be sustainable. It should be socially responsible. It should be all these things. And everybody told me I was insane and this wouldn't make sense. And at the time, every sushi restaurant served bluefin tuna, farm-raised, really low-quality Atlantic farm-raised salmon, Thai farm-raised shrimp, usually octopus that was dredge-caught, meaning like they destroy the coral reef to get the octopus, hamachi, which is farm raised in these small pens and fed genetically modified soy and chicken feathers, an eel unagi, which is also a freshwater eel, which is very unsustainably harvested. So those are like kind of the main things that people ate. And I was like, well, we're not serving a single one of those things. And everyone was like, you're crazy. No one's going to come to this restaurant. Like, that's what everybody eats. And I just felt like the world was changing. People were really starting to notice what their food was all about. And also, I felt like Portland was a great place because people here really do care about the connection between food and the environment. And so we opened, and, we've got 9 restaurants here now. So it's been exciting.
Well, and that brings to mind, we actually did a segment on poke maybe a couple years ago. And the conclusion was that poke was not an environmentally sound concept. If it keeps the growing in popularity, I guess because tuna's at the top of the food chain.
Exactly.
So, but you have quick fish poke restaurants. So how are you able to serve poke and still feel like you're doing the right thing?
Yeah. So it's our supply chain is the same at Bamboo as it is at Quick Fish. We have red meat tuna. It's traditionally hand line caught in Hawaii for us with a fishing company that we use there. It's day caught, so they go out, catch it, bring it back, send it to us. And it's big eye 9 times out of 10, which we love. We think it actually has the best flavor profile. And then sometimes yellowfin. We serve the same product at Quick Fish, and like we do at Bamboo, it's not something we encourage. We're not sitting there going, this is the one you have to buy, and it's the one with the box around it and a bunch of stars around it, and you should order that. And actually, there's a number of reasons for that. One is the environmental reason. The second is red meat tuna, because it's a top predatory species, we actually test all of our fish for mercury, but it does have the highest content of mercury in it. So most of our other fish actually have little to no detectable mercury in it is something very important to us, and something we're going to kind of be making a bigger announcement about in 2019 going forward, because people are eating more and more seafood, and we do want people to eat with us on a weekly basis, but we also understand that if you eat with us on a weekly basis and get mercury poisoning, that doesn't work for anyone.
Yeah.
So we're very thoughtful about this. We're very far ahead of that. And as time goes on, actually, it's funny you brought this up about Quickfish. We're redoing the entire Quickfish menu right now to, we started with the supply chain. We now have enough stores where we can drive value back into the supply chain. And so we're going to be lowering all of our prices and increasing the portion size, which for a lot of people, they're like, wow, that's amazing. And that's kind of one of our big beliefs, is that sustainable food should be available to everyone for a fair price.
Oh, good, because I love poke. And I was thinking I should stay away from it. So thank you. Thank you for doing this. Well, I don't know about you guys, but when I eat salty foods, I feel like I need a beverage. So for our final topic today, I thought we'd talk about what you guys like to drink with seafood. And I did bring a sparkling sake to taste. Unfortunately, we are taping in January. So our two guests are having dry Januaries, but you guys promised that you would have a little sniff and a taste and tell me what you think about this. So I'm going to get it out now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Ben, what brought you back to Portland? Or are you from here originally?
Not originally. I was born in Virginia, lived in Vermont, high school here, college in Seattle, and then I moved to San Francisco, and then I moved to Denmark, then Norway, then back here. So kind of all over the place. My folks live here, though.
Okay.
So that brought me back originally. And I lived, in Scandinavia for close to 5 years, and I love it, and wouldn't ever trade that experience for anything, and would most definitely do it again. But I was just I was ready for a little bit of a change, and you also have a market that I think is probably more risk taking than Seattleites might be, and shows up at farmers markets on a very, very frequent basis type of thing. So
yeah.
Who knows? But I feel fortunate to live here for sure.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's an exciting time for Portland.
What you were saying about prices, I just wrote an article about why Portland is the best champagne city in the world. We really do have this culinary bubble here. I know we're getting off topic.
No,
but
this is great. This is good. And this is what I bet this is what the audience wants to hear about anyway.
But we, for whatever reason, there are decades of explanations for this, but we get more champagne and cheaper champagne than any other city in the country.
Oh, I know. It's bananas.
Grower champagne. We have access that no one else has. So it's not only our just locally harvested, wonderful things that we have growing here, but for whatever reason, we've always been foodies, and those connections were made decades ago. So we have this amazing access. Same thing with Barolo. I mean, they're all sorts of categories of wine that you can find more of it here than anywhere else, which is just strange.
There's just this demand of like, well, no, it shouldn't be marked up 7 times.
No.
It'll just be this. And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
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 Then there's weird stuff that's expensive here that always catches me off guard. But
like what?
What was it the other day? Like photography. Because there's so many good photographers here in that craft, like it's as expensive to get an hourly rate on a photographer here as it is in New York.
Yeah.
Like when we're doing food photography,
yes,
and you're hiring somebody, you're like, it's $5,000 for the day, and they're like, yeah. And I'm like, it's $5,000 for the day for somebody in LA.
Yeah.
Like, how is this the same? So there's certain things like that that sort of trip me out.
Yeah.
But then you can get a massage for like $60 here, so that's good. So you're like, all right, it all evens out somewhere else.
Well, I guess it's time to move to our third topic. So both of you work with salty foods, and I was just curious about your thoughts about pairing salty foods with beverages. Ben, what do you like to drink with something that's flavored with sea salt?
I mean, it is January, and so I've been drinking a lot of soda water and bitters, which I really, really enjoy. And I was telling you, Catherine, before we started that around 5 or 6 o'clock, I have been really craving something nice and relaxing. But to me, honestly, it depends on what I'm eating. If it's a really salty beef rib from Matt's Barbecue or Bullard or number of good restaurants in town, then I'll usually try and go for like a bourbon or really kind of big red wine. But if it's sushi or something much lighter, then I don't drink a lot of sake, but I would like to learn a lot more about it for sure.
We should hang out more.
We should definitely hang out more. I would love to. But when it comes to sake, I don't know a lot, and I feel kind of totally out of the loop in that regard. So thank you for being here and telling me about it.
That's actually your sparkling sake that you brought. It's not bad. I've had that before too. It's good.
Yeah, it's Hideyoshi La Champte. I don't know how to pronounce this. Carbonated. I mean, they're straightforward about the fact that it's carbonated. It's not bottle fermented, obviously.
It's good.
Yeah, it's a little bit sweet, which is something I think comes up with salty foods. I think Americans are afraid of wines or beverages that have a sweetness to them, but they seem to work well with salt, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like to have with poke and sushi, Kristofor?
I don't. Well, when I'm having poke, I'm usually not drinking because it's usually a lunch kind of experience for me. Although sometimes I'll take it home, but it's usually post-workout. I kind of tend to find that those bowls and stuff are really good for like an on-the-go moment. So I'm not usually in a relaxed mode. So I'll be drinking kombucha, or we have a really good sparkling coconut lemonade that we do with a coconut water base with lemon. It's really awesome. So things like that. And then I would say for adult beverages, I am a big fan of wine. New World, Old World. I really like a lot of different varietals. And then I'm a huge sake fan. And of course, spirits. I mean, who doesn't love a great cocktail? Great whiskey or great gin or generally are my kind of go-tos.
So basically everything goes with sushi is what you're saying.
With sushi, yeah. I mean, honestly, if I'm pairing it with sushi, then I'm probably going to go sake. I might do a cocktail to start, maybe something with mezcal or gin, depending. Just a little bit of something that kind of gets the palate going. But yeah, for me, I mean, sake and sushi are sort of like peanut butter and jelly. You just kind of don't mess with a good thing.
Is there equivalent of with food, I do tend to like kind of high acid, low alcohol wines that are pretty bright. Is there kind of the sake equivalent of that?
Yeah, I mean, sake comes in so many different flavor profiles and ranges. I mean, it really is interesting because Americans are so used to either the Nigori, which is the cloudy one, which a lot of people think is unfiltered, but it's just unpressed. And then that's very sweet, and it's meant to traditionally be done with dessert in Japan. And so people have that here, and they think, well, that's kind of gross and sweet, and this is sort of weird, and I don't necessarily know if I like this. Or then they have hot sake, which the history, the lineage of sake was originally developed for the emperor. And then essentially the runoff that was left, this is, again, the story of how this goes, but probably somewhat truthful. The runoff the peasants had then still who made the sake, and then it was so kind of bacterially ridden, because sake is live, it has live yeast, that they would boil it, and then that's where hot sake came from. Now, the hot sake that you would buy at your local wherever, that's not obviously peasant runoff, whatever. It's just low quality. It's like grain alcohol kind of equivalent. It has a place. I think hot sake with, some, tempura or something like that. It's kind of fun on a cold night or whatever. It's, you're out with your friends, you're cheersing, you're getting kind of tipsy. It's fine. But for me, cold sake, premium sake, in range, you're talking between $20 a bottle up to $300 a bottle, depending on what you're serving or what you're eating it with. And yeah, there's a whole range. So there's, earthy, fruity, acidic. There's, a big, bold, like you would get with a big Napa cab. There's, more refined and subtle, like you might get with a Burgundian, old growth. So there's just these different things, and you kind of pair them with different stuff. Like when I'm eating sashimi on a hot day, I want something different than when I'm eating, let's say a grilled mackerel on a cold day. So it's just, it's very different for what you want. And I think that there's a lot of pairings. The thing that surprises a lot of people is I bring as a gift usually for dinner parties, sake. It's, usually kind of on brand for me. And and I'm always like, well, let's open it right now. And people are like, well, but I'm making pasta. I can't have sake. And I'm like, no, watch. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, just trust me. And so I've brought it to Greek restaurants before. I brought it to Italian restaurants. You bring it to a steak restaurant, and sake pairs with pretty much everything. Now, granted, I'll know ahead of time like which one to pick, but still nonetheless, like there's actually such a wide varietal range of things that, or wide varied range of flavor profiles that you can kind of pair it with almost anything. And there's no hangover, which is the awesome part.
It's a whole new world.
It's a whole new world. Great buzz, no hangover. It's fun.
Is there a sake bottle shop here? And if not, when are you starting one?
Yeah. There's not actually. I mean, you can go out to Awajimaya, which is a Asian grocery store in Beaverton. A little bit of a trek, but for people who kind of live close out there, it's great. They've got, I think, 30, maybe 40 different sake available. If you come to Bamboo, any of our Bamboos generally have 35 sake available. We're the largest seller of sake in the state of Oregon. So we are happy and excited to teach people about sake and to walk them through that process. We actually don't make a lot of money on our sake because it's one of those things that a lot of people don't know about, and so we can't mark it up like wine or beer or something because people are willing to pay the price because that's kind of already ingrained into the cultural mindset of like, oh, I'll pay this much for a beer or this much for whatever, and the markups are across the board fine for restaurants and businesses. But sake, people are like, why should I pay $60 for that bottle? And it's like, well, I paid $55 for it. We'll start there.
Yeah.
And then let me teach you this history of it. But we're so excited about it. We're such nerds about it at Bamboo that we're like, you know what? Let's just start teaching people about this stuff. We make money on liquor and everything else, so it's fine. And this is like a Japanese cultural heritage piece that's really meaningful to us. And so we really try to encourage people. I mean, I think we even, I don't know if we brought it back this year, but we had half price sake bottle Wednesdays. We just wanted people to come in and try it. It's not for any gimmick reason. I mean,
I know what I'm drinking next time I go to Bamboo then.
Yeah. And ask the server, say like, I like this kind of wine, or I like this kind of profile, or I'm feeling this way, and they'll guide you through it.
But you're adding to this Portland problem where Portland people think that they can get things for less.
Yeah, I know.
But I love it. I love that you're supporting sake. That's so cool.
We love it.
Well, it's time to move on to our dessert course where we each share something we've been thinking about this week or enjoying this week. And I feel like I had something in mind, but now I'm going to change it because this conversation has reminded me of a place that kind of ties together all the things we've been talking about. It reminds me of being in the Camargue in the south of France, where there are vineyards that are literally growing out of salt flats, growing out of the sand. And there's this one winery called Listel that makes this rosé that's basically like Coca-Cola in France. Everybody drinks it. They'll just call any rosé Listel. And I visited it, and it was just crazy. There were like sea beans. You know, you guys know what sea beans are.
We serve sea beans, and they're delicious.
Just growing out of
sea beans growing in our backyard at Neatarts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're so
delicious.
good.
Yeah.
Put them on a salad.
I love them. But they were literally growing like in the sand right next to these vines.
Neat.
And these just really old vines, and they have to make rosé because the vines are just growing out of sand, and the grapes they don't have any tannin or any color in them because they're just so challenged by the environment. But the salt flats turn pink. I don't know if you've ever seen this. You probably have seen this many times before, Ben. And the flamingos in the area are very pink because they're eating whatever makes the salt flats pink. Maybe you can
brine shrimp, probably.
The brine shrimp, yeah. It's just this wild place that, you don't know it exists till you go there, and you're like, how is this even possible?
Yeah.
So
I was just in Guatemala a couple of weeks ago over Christmas and New Year's, and that was my first trip there, and visited. We source 6 different salts from around the world, and all 6 of them we buy directly from the salt producers, so that we know and shake the hands of everybody that we buy salt from, and because we're salt makers ourselves, and so I was visiting our Guatemalan salt producers, or the folks that make salt that we buy from, and it was I woke up before sunrise, which was. This was after a long night of drinking really, really good Guatemalan rum, and then woke up 4:30 or 5 o'clock and walked outside and started taking pictures, and people were already at work before the sun came up, moving salt by wheelbarrow into the salt facility, and I don't know, it was just a really, really humbling, impressive experience that just to know that every single day people are there, walking barefoot in these salt flats, working very, very physically hard for, dollars a day, if that, to bring salt to market. And, but yet salt is one of these things that we all have to physically survive. we can't live without it. So salt it's a very humbling ingredient and a very important ingredient for sure.
It's so interesting to see it harvested. So did you bring a dessert item to share with us?
Can I run and get some salty caramels for everybody?
Sure.
My wife will love those.
Yeah. 1 second.
The caramels have been gotten.
So I'll just
caramels
say,
have been obtained.
So Ben, you didn't bring a figurative dessert today. You brought an actual dessert. And I'm about to taste one of them, but maybe you can tell us about them.
Yeah. I brought our, so we started out making salty black licorice because I, just like good salt, fell in love with salty black licorice, and living in Scandinavia, salty black licorice living in Scandinavia is can be pretty abrasive, which I happen to like. But we tried to kind of temper this more for the American palate, so it's a pretty mild salt licorice, but it's still really, really delicious. And then one of our customers, William Sonoma, asked us. They said, "Hey, you guys make licorice? Can you do salty caramels?" And we said, "Sure." And so we did that, and then that did well. And then we acquired a honey company called Be Local. And to kind of celebrate that partnership, we did we tried to kind of reinvent honey nut chews of old, and so we did a salty honey nut chew. And then salty caramel, and then our latest one is a Stumptown coffee caramel, which is really delicious.
I'm definitely bringing that.
That actually has cold brew in place of cream in the caramel. So
this licorice is amazing. It's not too sweet. I mean, really, you can taste the anise. It's just really, I love anise. It's very pungent and flavorful. And
Glad you like it.
The salt just brings out all the flavor.
Yeah.
I wonder how it is with sparkling sake.
I bet it's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So, Kristofor, have you thought of a dessert item for us?
Kind of to your point earlier about the south of France and seeing that. One of the things that's just kind of tying in Ben's Netarts Bay and our work on the coast. I just would love. I know a lot of Oregonians and a lot of Portlanders spend a lot of time on Mount Hood, spend a lot of time in the rivers. But I think, our coast here is often a underappreciated asset that we have. It's pretty rough and pretty rugged. But I would say, if people can just take the chance to get out there and spend some time at the ocean, I think it would really, it's an awe-inspiring place, and I for one, feel called and compelled to do environmental work there just because of the fact that it's something that when you stand at the edge of the ocean, I think we've all had that experience before if we've been lucky enough to stand at the edge of an ocean, you feel so small and yet so connected to the universe. Kind of like being quiet and looking up at the stars, but it's just a little different. So, I don't know, I guess my dessert would just be to ask folks, especially this time of year when it's really like intense weather and gusty and stormy, I don't know, go out there and make a campfire and see if you can find some crabs molting and go, have an oyster roast and check it out. It's a really special place, and I think the Oregon coast in general is just it's really cool because on the west coast of the United States, it almost feels like a place that people have forgotten.
Yeah.
Their time's forgotten.
Yeah.
And that's very special given, especially as a Californian, like time is not forgotten the coast there. There's oil derricks everywhere and beaches that are, covered in people and usually lookout points everywhere. And the Oregon coast is just really special. It's just miles of beach with nobody on it.
And it is so interesting in the winter. You'll find things like sometimes you'll go and there'll just be foam everywhere. Yeah. It's almost like snow, and it's so otherworldly.
Yeah.
So my favorite time of the year to be out there.
It's actually mine. Yeah. I spent, my wife and I went out there for Valentine's Day last year, and it was a perfectly sunny day on the coast. We went down to Manzanita and rented a house right on the beach, and spent Valentine's Day there. And it was absolutely amazing. We had just such a great time, and I don't know, it just kind of reconnects you to everything and definitely makes you appreciate Oregon, I think, in a way that oftentimes being a little bit more landlocked, river-locked, you don't think about as much.
To me, standing on the coast and especially at sunset and being able to see the curvature of the earth is the most humbling thing I experience on a regular basis. It's just like when you see really how small not only you are, but really the earth is. It's a pretty it makes you realize how special every interaction that we have with not only people but how we treat the environment around us is just so important. It's such a small place, and it's a pretty fragile place for sure.
Well, on that note, I am humbled by our two panelists today, and I want to thank you both for being here. Kristofor Lofgren, founder and CEO of the Sustainable Restaurant Group, which includes Bamboo Sushi and Quick Fish, multiple locations. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And Ben Jacobsen, our host today at Jacobsen Salt, founder and CEO of Jacobsen Salt, as well as Be Local Honey, and you also make these delicious candies that we've been enjoying. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming.
Listeners, we love feedback. Please visit our website at theforetop.org, and you'll find links there to all of our social media handles so you can get in touch with us and continue the conversation. You can also email us at theforetop@gmail.com. Izzy Kramer, our assistant producer, loves to hear from you. Today's episode was recorded in the high-fiber, protein-packed city of Portland, Oregon, not in the studios of OPB, but at Jacobsen Salt. Alex Ward is our editor and sound tech today, and special thanks to sound supervisor Stephen Cray and the web staff at OPB. Our theme music was performed by the incomparable wine importer Kermit Lynch. You can listen to our 56 back episodes on your favorite podcast app, including Spotify, iTunes, NPR One, and Stitcher. Or you can get them through our dedicated website at theforetop.org, where you can also donate to our show. Bye-bye.
Nuit blanche, nuit blanche, nuit blanche.